Hi, anyone and everyone. Welcome to Have You Heard About This Case? My name is Sam.
And my name is Kelly. I'm excited to call attention to the case this week because it seems like it's just getting not enough engagement, and it involves another passion of mine, which is fashion. Before we get to the glitz and the glamour and a striking murder in the fashion world, Sam, what's our question today?
My question is, what's the last book you read?
Ooh, the last book I read was the last in a trilogy by Garth Nix called the Old Kingdom series, and it is 3 books: Sabriel, Lyriel, and Aborson. I was rereading them because I'm in a reading slump, wanted to try something that I knew I liked. And they're fantasy, and they held up so well. It was so great to reread them.
Oh, nice. I've never heard of those.
Oh, they're really fun. You would actually like it. A lot of the stories actually deal with death because one of the two of the main characters are necromancers.
Oh, wow. Interesting. I'll have
It's
to check
awesome.
that out.
What about you?
I just finished, because I'm an audiobook person, so I'm usually listening to audiobooks pretty frequently. And I just finished The Island by Adrian McKinty.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew nothing about it. It was just, I clicked on my Chicago Public Library app, went to
Oh.
Available Now audiobooks, and just clicked one. And it was really good. I really enjoyed it. It
Oh,
was
that's
very
awesome.
different than what I kind of thought from the description. Because it's about this American family who's on vacation in Australia, and they go on this like sightseeing kind of tour on this remote island and get stranded, and it kind of turns
Oh
into
no.
like the what's it called, the deadliest game, is that what it's called,
Oh, the most
the
dangerous
humans
game.
most dangerous game, that's it. So it kind of
Yeah.
turns into something like that, but it has its own twists and
Wow.
turns through it. It was good. I enjoyed it. I recommend it.
Wow. That sounds super interesting.
It was a well done audiobook.
Oh, that's so important too. That
Mm-hmm.
it's like that it's read well.
Exactly.
I mean, you and me can both vouch that Dave Grohl doing any audiobook is what you want.
Dave Grohl or Ryder Strong, who
Oh,
was Sean in Boy Meets
yes.
World.
Yes.
He
Oh my gosh.
did Anthony Kiedis' Scar Tissue, and he had the absolute perfect voice to do Scar Tissue. It was so good.
I love Boy Meets World so much, and I was like, I can fix Sean Hunter. I can
Right?
fix him. These girls can't fix him, but I can.
Right. He was always my favorite. And I've searched to see if he does other books. He doesn't. That's the only book he has done.
Oh wow.
It is
Oh, that's
so
interesting.
good. It is such an incredible book, and it's such an incredible audiobook because of him.
That's really cool.
Definitely recommend it.
I guess we should kick off our story here.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, given all we've shared in these past 30-ish episodes and all the people we've met in the podcast community who are so nice, I realize that you folks don't know too much about us. Some of that is to keep things private, but today I want to talk to you about style, artistry, and fashion. I usually wear all black head to toe. I suppose these days you would call me an elder goth.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, I think that's what they're calling us now. I don't know.
We grew up in like the emo phase, and we've just grown up into a lot of black clothing from that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. The real reason actually I wear black all day is because of my past in professional theater. All run crew members, so those behind the scenes that may go on stage, particularly to move furniture or something, are required to wear what are called running blacks.
Mm-hmm.
On these clothes, every part of your outfit must be black and non-reflective in any manner. It was the only way you wouldn't get called out in notes for not wearing running blacks, or even called to change your shoes.
Yeah, it just stands out so much as an audience member if you're looking at somebody who's supposed to be essentially the background moving furniture with some bright
Right.
colored anything.
Especially if you're in a scene change is the
Mm-hmm.
thing. Because you're
Exactly.
in the blackout. Yeah. You're in the blackout. You're wearing white socks. We can all see you by the light of the glow tape. We see your white socks.
Exactly. Yep.
My running crew shoes, I praise them and love them. They were high top black on black Converse because then I could wear whatever socks I wanted and people wouldn't be
Right.
like, Kelly, we see your white socks.
Right. That's the way to do it.
So when I moved out of college and into adulthood, most of my clothing was black from all the shows I did during school. I started to like it, and now I wear mostly black, not much color, maybe neutrals and grays or navies.
Yeah, I definitely wear a lot of blacks, grays, and like dark jewel tones, I think is
Oh,
a
yeah.
very large majority of my wardrobe.
Yeah. A jewel tone is really pretty, and I'll do one of those every so often, but that's pretty rare for me.
Yeah, I love like a dark green or a burgundy, but
Mm-hmm.
majority blacks and grays.
Yeah, same here. Also, if you spill your coffee on your black shirt, you're still good to go, and I'm a clumsy bitch.
Yup. Worked in coffee for many years, so that's a big part of it for me.
However, despite everything I just told you, I do happen to love and watch fashion. It's just another passion of mine that I took to for I'm not sure what reason. One of my best friends who I lived with is now a personal shopper at Saks Fifth Avenue. So we communicate about fashion and our thoughts on trends, even though I'm in all black and he's the one actually rocking the trends.
Yeah, and he has such a passion for it. It's pretty incredible.
He's extremely dedicated to his work, and we'll hear various bits and bobs from him, quotes and all sorts of things. I interviewed him to
Oh, great.
tell us all about this. My favorite fashion house is actually pretty predictable. I love Chanel. I do.
If I had, I'm not a huge fashion person. So I'm sure there's going to be a ton here I'm going to learn. But from the few I know, I think Chanel is my favorite as well.
Yeah, it's just I love Chanel. I can't help but that I have criminally good taste because I also have a passionate love. I also have a passionate love for Valentino, Schiaparelli, Givenchy, Christian Siriano, Jenny Yu, and Vera Wang. I love them
And
all, and
I know about half of those. It's not as much my world. So you're certainly going to be teaching me a lot if we're starting out like this.
I can share that all of those names that I just mentioned, I cannot afford. So,
Yeah, that's a big reason I probably haven't heard of them because I'm just like I can't afford it. I'm not going to dive too deep into this.
right, I love to see and follow fashion shows, but yeah, I can't afford anything from any of those stores just listed, so I wouldn't expect you to be like, oh, Schiaparelli, of course.
Right. My sister was into purses for quite a while, where she had a lot of high-end purses. That's where my knowledge comes from, is living through her and her love of it.
Living through her love of purses. However, I would put on the top level one of my absolute favorites, if not my favorite designer. One that inspires some of my work we do in our Etsy shop is Alexander McQueen.
That's a name I'm familiar with.
Yes, McQueen was, in my opinion, a visionary. He became known as the, quote, hooligan of English fashion.
Oh, that's fun. I like that.
Isn't that great? I love that too. His work was indomitable and showed his spirit every time. Unfortunately, as his collections unfolded, we began to see that spirit strongly affecting McQueen. My fashion source and I remember vividly, I believe it was McQueen's Menswear 2010 show, where models walked to the sounds of a tightening rope.
That's such a specific sound. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
know exactly what that sounds like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Unfortunately, McQueen suffered with his mental health so much that he died by suicide in 2010.
Oh, wow.
He hung himself.
So he unfortunately was probably thinking that for a while based on his runway shows.
Correct.
That's very
Correct.
sad.
Yes, he had a lot of struggles with his mental health, but his clothing is just undeniably beautiful, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't really know what his clothing is like. I just recognize his name.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to
Yeah,
look him
yeah,
up.
I love. You will, yeah. The great, beautiful stuff.
I have a feeling if you like it, I probably like it because we have very similar taste.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, you'd probably like it. It's McQueen. I love you, Alexander. We miss you. Katie's fashion story is very similar to McQueen's in artistry, and her death would play out in an arguably as disturbing manner. Katie's shows always didn't just rely on putting clothes in front of an audience, but they would make an experience and an atmosphere at her shows. And I asked my fashion source what they think a good fashion show would be like, one that would make it to the big time at Fashion Week shows. And he said, quote, the perfect mix of fashion and theater. You go into the space, you see the clothes, they spark emotion, and you can sense a change is coming. End quote.
I like that. That's a really neat description, especially like sensing a change. Like that's I feel like that's kind of the point of a lot of fashion shows is to
Absolutely.
bring forward something new. But it is
Yes,
an
yes.
atmosphere. It's everything surrounding it, not just the clothing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we'll learn more about Katie and the different atmospheres she would create that were just remarkable. And Katie Gallagher shows would hit all those markers. And she was a meticulous artist when it came to her collections. But to get there, we have to go back to the beginning of Katie's story. Wikipedia's quick notes on Katie were Catherine Marie Katie Gallagher grew up in a small area but followed her passions all the way to New York City, where she founded and established her own eponymous fashion brand. Katie's pieces that she and her brand had built appeared in such storied fashion publications as Vogue Italia, Elle, Interview Magazine, and Refinery 29 magazine.
There's some big publications.
Yes, interesting. Very, very high power fashion. And Refinery 29 even named her as one of the 6 designers to watch in the upcoming feature.
Oh, wow.
Katie was born on August 25th, 1986, in Western Pennsylvania, and she spent her early childhood there. Speaking about her youth, Gallagher said, quote, I never wore shoes and I hated wearing clothes, but I always wore my cat on my head. It's so funny to me that Katie would be such a fashion powerhouse and as a kid just enjoyed nothing more than running around naked.
Right? That's funny.
Very funny. In 7th grade and through her time at high school, Katie's family had settled in State College, Pennsylvania. During this time, living in the quiet town, Katie taught herself to sew. One of the things she commonly did was search for vintage clothes and then alter them on her little Singer sewing machine.
That is me.
I know. When I was writing the script, I was like, this just reminds me of Sam because I would love to be able to have this talent to like I think it's so cool to take something discarded and make it new again. And I just would love that talent. And when it came to like the altering of the little singer sewing machine, I was like, oh my God, Sam has to hear this.
That's exactly what I used to do. Every Wednesday night, one of my best friends, Bridget, and I would go to the thrift shop because we had one in my town, and it was only open late on Wednesday nights. So every Wednesday, her and I went and would do like a shopping haul, and then I'd come home and alter things and change everything around. I had a lot of fun doing that in high school.
That is so cool. I would love to be able to sew or make clothes.
I love sewing. It to me it's just relaxing, and it drives you nuts if it's not going right, but it's therapeutic at the same time.
Unfortunately, I could not find the name of the high school she graduated from, but Katie would have graduated in 2005. As soon as she graduated, Katie declared for Rhode Island School of Design, or RISD. I had dreams of going there for art when I was in school, but the school is famously extremely selective.
Oh, really? I've never heard of it.
Yes, they're extremely selective. As of today, only 19% of those who apply are accepted to RISD.
Oh, wow. That's a very small percentage.
Extremely selective. And I basically knew on the back of my portfolio there was no way I could make it to RISD. I wanted to go though. Students that get into RISD have an average SAT score between 1310 or 1480, or an average ACT score of 28 to 34.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so once again, I'd like to highlight how special Katie was. She was not only very talented, she was very smart and very in demand by some of the most prestigious schools for college.
Yeah, if your scores are that high, absolutely.
Absolutely, and I can say my ACT score falls 1 point short
Oh,
what would be
no.
acceptable for RISD acceptance. So I would have not even if my portfolio had been amazing, they probably would have been like, look.
Right. Yeah, I just glanced really quick, and it looks like they have about 2,500 students. That's a small school. That, like, and having that high of scores, like, they can be selective. And I went to a small college.
Yeah.
We had about 3,000 students in my college, maybe 3,500. But that it just shows you how small and selective they can really be with your student body that small.
Absolutely. So like they pick only the best of the best artists.
And art schools in general are hard to get into, just as a whole.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. It is difficult. And RISD is one of the best. I would say arguably FIT, the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City, might be the best.
That's one I've heard of. And that's one I've heard of being very, very prestigious.
Yes. So, but Katie came from a smaller school, though no less selective. And by this time in her life, she was making very complex and beautifully constructed garments. And it's notable that Katie was completely self-taught when she entered RISD.
That's impressive. To teach yourself how to sew is not easy. And I definitely didn't do it. I was taught how to sew by my grandmother.
No, and she would have had to make a collection to go before this panel of extremely selective people to get in. So she did it all. She was all self-taught.
That's very impressive.
After her freshman year at RISD, Katie declared her major as apparel design. Her first project was a dress fabricated from springs that she had made herself.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, yeah. I have a photograph of it and we'll share it on Instagram. It's quite remarkable in construction and was noticed by her teachers. Her professor, Meg de Cuvier, recalled that despite the challenges working with the coiled springs, the designer, Katie, was determined to use them. After managing to find a source for them, the factory broke down. But Gallagher, in typical fashion, remained undeterred and handmade the coils and then handmade the dress herself.
Wow. How small were they? Or like, was it something that was kind of big that was easier, or something like a pen, tiny?
It it was like what you would see in a remote, I would
Oh,
say.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah,
Wow. That's
small.
impressive to make a whole dress out of that.
Yeah, whole dress. I could imagine it. And when when like you find the factory and then it just shuts down, I probably would have been like, okay, well, back to the drawing board. But she made them herself.
That's so impressive.
Katie interned for Anna Sui during the summer following her sophomore year. Anna Sui is an absolute force in the fashion industry. She was named one of the top 5 fashion icons of the decade, and in 2009 earned the Geoffrey Bean Lifetime Achievement Award from the Council of Fashion Designers of America, joining the ranks of Yves Saint Laurent, Giorgio Armani, Ralph Lauren, and Diane von Furstenberg.
Wow. That's big. Be top 5 in a decade.
So Katie interning underneath her was a big deal. These were the caliber of the designers who were interested in Katie, and I think that's pretty remarkable considering she was only a sophomore in college.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was in college, I don't know any sophomores who were really doing internships at all, let alone a prestigious one like that.
Yeah, yeah. Ours was more of the latter half of college, like
Hmm.
junior, senior year. You might do an internship.
Yeah, yeah. Same with our school. I didn't do one, but I had a few friends who I think did them senior year.
During the summers following her sophomore year, between her junior and senior years, and also during winter break in her senior year, Katie interned at a brand called 3 as 4. 3 as 4 is a New York fashion house led by Gabriel Asfor, Angela Donhauser, and Adi Gill. Known for combining technical innovation and couture craftsmanship with an aesthetic focus on natural geometries. Gabriel was from Lebanon, Angela hailed from Germany, and Gil from Israel.
I'm sure they brought in their cultures. That's cool that they're
Exactly,
from such
yes.
different, like incredibly different areas.
Yes, the three would say that 3 as 4 was a United Nations of fashion.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, their collections frequently promote intercultural unity. So, exactly what you would think.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
The house presents their designs at New York Fashion Week, and their work is exhibited by several museums internationally, including the Metropolitan Museum's Costume Institute and London's Victoria and Albert Museum.
Oh, cool.
Understandably, with Katie working for these brands that were internationally renowned as well as based in New York, Katie was honing her own gifts and perhaps around this time began to think about the move from RISD to New York.
Which seems logical.
Right. You're reaching sort of the end of your college time, and it's undeniable that she was getting attention and exposure to some of the most famous designers already.
Yeah, absolutely. And you now need to think about career after college.
Right. 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 So this may have been around her time she started thinking that. 2009 was Katie's senior year at RISD, and like many of us, Her senior year was consumed by a senior thesis project.
Oh, I remember. Very difficult, intense.
Those were rough times.
Yep.
Those were rough, stressful times. And Katie's senior thesis project would be to create a full collection to display.
That's awesome. And that's not easy to really come up with a cohesive collection that's all different from each other,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
follow the same general theme. I had to do that
Exactly.
for one of my art classes as my final project, my senior year, in
Mm-hmm.
painting, and that was not easy.
Mm-hmm. And so this would serve as sort of the capstone of Katie's work at RISD. And in a move that I love, I think is iconic and is so fierce, Katie created her entire senior thesis collection in black.
I like it.
I love it. She worked so hard on it that it included several tailored dresses, silk and leather jackets, and detailing that included silver chains and ruffles.
That sounds awesome.
Oh, doesn't it sound so cool?
Yeah.
It just sounds cool. And I would like to call out her use of silk as it's a finicky fabric, and Katie would have had to use special preparations to use it and special needles to sew it.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of things that you need to change between your fabrics when you're working with something like that. It's not easy if you have never
Mm-hmm.
done it before. It's
Yeah.
can be very, very difficult.
Yeah. And because her collection was so wide ranging, she's also working with this leather, which she would have had to work for the jackets. And it is an incredibly unforgiving material in the sewing world. If you make a mistake with stitches, you've created a permanent hole in that fabric. So if you want to salvage that piece, there's very little you can do.
Yes. I actually work with embroidery in my current job, and we're not working with leather, but we have some of the same issue with some of the things that we embroider. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
if my a needle breaks in my embroidery machine or anything like that, I have to be very careful that everything still
Right.
lines up at the end and I'm not
Right.
damaging anything out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just thought I'd call them out to further highlight the talent that Katie had amassed at RISD as only a college age student.
Yeah, I wasn't doing anything like that in college, and I've been sewing for 20 years at that point, almost.
Wow. And she clearly had absorbed so much of what she had learned in school and the interning for the powerful fashion elite. And all of this hard work Katie did, thankfully, did not go unnoticed. The work she produced at RISD caught the attention of various big name fashion magazines, such as Interview Magazine and a big one, Vogue Italia.
Oh, wow. As a college student, that's incredible.
Mm-hmm. Buyers from fashion boutiques also flocked to Katie from Seven, New York, in New York City, and IT in Hong Kong. It was during Katie's senior year that magazine editors began to interview her about fashion.
That's impressive. Like, that all of this is just blowing me away because I know how much work
Mm-hmm.
goes into that.
Mm-hmm. It's incredible the statement that she managed to make with her college years. It's great.
It makes me look back on my college years being like, I thought my college years were incredible. I learned so much. I use what I learned in college literally every day in my career.
Mhm.
There's nothing that I did that compares to this.
It's wild. And in 2009, Katie Gallagher graduated from the Rhode Island School of Design with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Apparel degree in May. In May 2009, Katie moved to New York City, where she established her brand that was named for her, Katie Gallagher. During this time, she was first living in the city. Katie moved into the Chinatown area of Manhattan.
No, it's awesome. Good for her. But that's some big steps moving to a big city right after college. Like, that's not easy things to do.
Yeah, it's striking out on your own. Yeah. And we'll see that sort of come back. She does strike out. She does her own thing. And now we're going to talk about some of my favorite parts, the composition and artistic process of creating a collection. It was in her time while she was newly in New York, Katie began work on her SS10. This is a fashion design shorthand for the Spring-Summer 2010 collection. Katie had aspirations of the line being shown at the pinnacle of her field, some may argue, New York Fashion Week, in September 2009. We're going to talk about Fashion Week and what it means shortly, but for now, let's hear more from Katie's process. Katie made sketches and paintings of all the pieces in her collection to establish the design for the line prior to the fabrication.
I love seeing those sorts of sketches and paintings. I think those are always incredible art. Even if it's sloppy or if it's like perfect, I love all of that.
I agree. I love seeing the individual style people use. Like when I was obtaining my own BFA, our costume design class, we were put to work creating many of these drawings, which in theater we call renderings, though that might not be the correct term in the fashion world. But these renderings we had to create were very like realistic clothing, like this is how it will look, and here is a swatch of the fabric, and there wasn't much room for like the artistry of a good rendering done by a fashion designer.
It kind of reminds me of
they're all unique.
Exactly, and it reminds me a lot of it's similar but obviously very different at the same time. But I took a class that was live drawing from a nude model, and it was one of my favorite things, just seeing what my classmates were drawing and their styles, because that's the sort of thing where everyone truly has their own style to create something that we're all seeing in front of us. And I love that. And I think that a lot of drawings when it comes to fashion collections have similar sorts of variation from artist to artist and designer to designer, while still kind of having a similar outcome in the end. And I think that's so cool because everyone has their own process and you can see it in those drawings.
Yeah, there are many paths to creating something that you love, you know? There's so many different ways to get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Katie's sister Lara said she always talked about how fashion wasn't the end goal. It was about stories, and her shows were about the music, the tone, the lighting, and the world that she was creating rather than any one garment.
See, that sounds like the type of fashion show I'd be very interested in going to see.
Absolutely. It implies such a level of thought to that collection that it would be remarkable to see. Katie's hard work paid off again as her SS10 collection, entitled Veil, was well received by the press. She then submitted photos of the designs to the Eco Damiani Fashion Foundation for their consideration in their 2009-2010 search for emerging designers. Katie Gallagher was named as a semi-finalist in the 2009-2010 Eco Damiani Fashion Foundation for Emerging Fashion Designers.
No, it's awesome.
It is, because the competition is a big one. It's a big one that a lot of people do. Eco Damiani is a popular wine brand that each year picks artists to unveil its new line of wine in summer. The fashion designers each create their own take on Eco Damiani's logo that will appear on their wines for that year.
Oh, I love that. That sounds so
Yeah.
cool.
Past winners include Zach Posen, Christian Siriano, and Jeremy Scott.
Oh, wow. I know all of those names, so that means they have to be really big designers for me to know.
It's super competitive, right? So it's like these are the caliber of designers who are entering, and Katie was a semi-finalist.
That's incredible.
The winner of the coveted spot is also awarded $25,000 and a chance to show their collection at the biggest fashion event of the year, New York Fashion Week.
Wow. And I feel like $25,000, like that's obviously a ton of money, but in this
Mm-hmm.
industry, it doesn't go terribly far, I feel like. Because if you've
Right.
looked into good materials and good fabrics, that stuff's not cheap at all.
Yeah, I think the more attractive part of winning this would be the slot at Fashion Week.
Yeah, and I would assume the 25,000 helps start
Fun.
that
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
Like it's not going to cover
Yeah.
all of the costs involved, but it's a fantastic start to that.
Mm-hmm. And you have your slot,
Mm-hmm.
so you don't, And so let's talk about New York Fashion Week a bit and how it works. Luckily, my source is one of my best friends, and he has been to New York Fashion Week twice.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes, he went for Saks. He explained a little bit about who is selected and how it happens. One way to get into Fashion Week is a tale as old as time. You can pay your way in. And so you're paying for the space to hold the show, you're paying for the models, and you're paying for the slot in Fashion Week itself. In total, my source estimated that this would cost the buyer $1 million at minimum.
See, that doesn't really surprise me too much. Just as what we were saying with the cost of everything that goes into it. But you know what that sounds like to me more than anything? That sounds like a Super Bowl ad. Like
Yeah.
you're paying to get the views so that more people
Right.
get your product in the end. And you're paying for those eyes.
Yes, yes. Another way to get into Fashion Week is design competitions where various people apply and you show your collections to industry professionals. We've all seen them, just like Project Runway, only these are much larger fashion houses. They select a finalist, and usually that finalist gets mentorship and they will sponsor you to go to Fashion Week.
And I'm sure that's a huge deal if you're able to get in that way.
Exactly. Another of the most storied competitions is the Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy competition. The top winner gets $400,000. And as we
Wow.
mentioned, these shows cost millions of dollars, so you would need this money.
Absolutely.
And in addition to that, you would receive this mentorship and your slot at Fashion Week. So you know that your $400,000 is at least not going to getting a slot at Fashion Week. Like you already have that.
Right. But you still need to pay for, obviously, all your
Correct.
materials, the models, all
Correct.
of that. Mm-hmm.
And the biggest thing these competitions offer is just what we've been discussing, exposure. You want those eyes. My best friend described it, I thought, very well when he said, you want the eye of the customer, but you also want the eye of the buyer. And we're talking luxury department stores, high-end boutiques, and luxury retailers that are going to judge what they want to buy, and high-end boutiques that are exclusively online like Net-a-Porter.
That makes sense. That's a fairly common just business practice. And even if like high end, not high end, whatever business you're in, is just knowing your target audience. And that's both the consumer and the retailers who will be selling your product.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So you're being judged at Fashion Week, but not by a panel, by your prospective customers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
The simplest way to get into Fashion Week is to be invited. Typically, the people invited would normally be a friend of a fashion house or a former employee of a larger house who has since left and has a new collection or their own line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so if you left on good terms, you might be invited back to show your new line with the house you were once.
Which I'm sure would be a huge honor, too, that you've branched
Mm-hmm.
off and have that support from your previous
Yeah,
employer.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
It's like your ultimate referral letter or your
Yeah,
reference letter.
exactly. It really is. My source tells me the purpose of Fashion Week is a couple. One, to get top clients, editors of magazines, and buyers to be together to see what will be available for sale for the future season. And two, it has obviously become a major media spectacle now, which is arguably good for the exposure.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And I say arguably because when discussing with my source, I asked how he felt about Fashion Week's popularity increasing and being attended by many celebrities. And he said, quote, as a fangirl, it's cool to see celebrities, but it's also complicated because it makes it more difficult to see the collection with the client and review the collection to determine which pieces to buy. It's typically more productive if you are going to a showroom after the show. End quote.
That makes sense. Because when you first were starting that, I was thinking, like, it would be great to have the celebrities there because ideally they're going to be buying this, and then if a celebrity is wearing it, you know that there's going to be a market of their fans that are also going to want it. But I can understand what he's saying there, and it kind of clouds the business part of it on the other end.
Yeah, well, not only that, it clouds visually as well because you can't see the clothes as well. You may be seated further back. You will likely be seated further back. And
right, that makes sense.
That's why these market appointments are typically made by the more wealthy and powerful clients who want to see the collection up close. These are held in the showrooms, which are the designer's most intimate space. It will reflect the brand in decor, and sometimes the designers will attend. Sometimes it might even be connected to their studio.
That makes sense because as I haven't done a ton of buying for companies that I've worked with, but I've done a little bit where I've needed to really see the product and getting up close to it, feeling the materials, all of that is a big part of that. So that makes a lot of sense to have those kind of private meetings to see all of that up close.
Right, right. So if you were looking particularly at a certain collection and you knew you had the intention to buy in the showroom, they're all going to be there and available for you. Because procedurally, the showrooms are there for buyers or VIP customers. So you go to the space and the samples of the entire collection are there. And if the client is sample size, you can even try on the pieces of the collection.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so if there's a big hubbub at the runway show, and a runway show is usually over in 10 minutes these days because you have cameras and YouTube and celebrities now capturing it. And like I said, it also can be difficult to see. This way, if you were a VIP client with the market appointment, you can avoid hubbub and your client can go through everything that was shown in the collection. Every piece. Some of these clients even skip the show and just do a market appointment.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Like the show is the spectacle. And really, when you're thinking about it, it's the consumer that the show is more important to. And I assume these market appointments are much more important to the retailer because when you're shopping for something, like let's use Saks as an example, since we've talked about that, as a consumer, me going into Saks, I'm not looking at the products as if they're in a fashion show.
Mm-hmm.
But I might have that in my mind if I watched it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it makes sense. If I were a rich, fabulous person, that's exactly what I would do.
Right?
Also, though, I do love the theater aspect of it. So I don't know. I'll keep it on my vision board for when I'm rich.
Right.
At the showroom, models are also there to show the clothes on for the clients who are not sample sized. So you can still see the clothes and how they hug the body when they're made in your size. If you're a large brand that has showed during New York, you probably also have a showroom in Paris and Milan. Hence the expression New York, Paris, Milan, you might see on things.
Mm-hmm.
New York Fashion Week has always been looked at as kind of the kid sister to Paris or Milan. Because American style used to be very sportswear forward, but the past couple decades, it's become a laboratory for progressive and emerging designers. So it could be argued that the kid sister is growing up.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely been a change in fashion, at least from my perspective as a non-fashion person. You can definitely see that there's a change. And I agree. We used to be very, very much athletic forward for a long time.
Mm-hmm. And to bring it back to Katie, she showed 26 collections at New York Fashion Week and 8 collections at Paris Fashion Week.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. I shared all this info to help provide context into how hard it is to get these clothes to Fashion Week and to put the show together and the luxury space that Katie had entered. And she's entering it yearly at New York Fashion Week.
And if you're just thinking like as an example of her going back each year, if she's paying for these slots, which I don't know if she is or not, that's millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Right.
That's a lot. Even if she's not like buying her slot in, she's probably still paying millions throughout all of this just to get the models and like all the booking stuff that's required.
I imagine so. And in the spring summer 2010 to autumn winter 2012, Katie was particularly prolific. She would go onward at seemingly a nonstop pace, presenting collections for SS10, AW10, SS11, AW11, and AW12, 2012. As I'm sure you can see until now, that fashion is cyclical between those two periods, AW signifying autumn, winter. It always wants to be ahead. So if you ever walked into a Target in March and seen bikinis, that's why.
Mm-hmm.
They're cyclical by season, of course, because it's fashion.
Yeah, and in my world, it's like cars. Like I grew up very, very much around cars, and you see, like for example, we're seeing, or we will very shortly be seeing, our 2024 models in dealerships now, and it's 2023 still. So you're jumping ahead for that new year.
Exactly. Yes, just like that. And so Katie had achieved her dream of showing at New York Fashion Week. As we just heard, she would go on to continue living her dreams. Her spring-summer 2010 collection, Veil, was called Darkly Futuristic and Sleek in Refinery 29.
Sounds like my style.
I agree. I would be interested.
Like the style I want, I should say.
Yeah.
Not my current style.
Yeah.
My current style is darks or a concert t-shirt and jeans.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if I had the money, that's what I want.
Yes. For autumn and winter of 2010, Katie had new ideas, as she always seemed to. The collection that autumn winter was called The Heart of the Woods and What I Found There. It featured dark layered separates with flashes of cream, gray, and green.
That sounds wonderful. As I was saying earlier, like green or like a burgundy are the two colors I love to add in with my blacks and grays.
Mm-hmm. I love a jewel tone.
Mm-hmm.
For spring and summer of 2011, Katie presented her collection Arena, and it was called Sporty Yet Aggressive. And I love that review. I would just like to go into the gym and look aggressively ready to work out to inspire myself to get on that treadmill.
Right? I like that.
I wish. The collection was, of course, inspired by athletics, but in particular by running. Katie was a prolific runner. The show was also truly groundbreaking, as in her work here and in previous collections, Katie melded her passions for athletics and fashion, and was one of the first to start adding mesh inserts into leggings.
Oh, wow. And I feel like that, like every legging now has that.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely have quite a few pairs.
Same. It's incredibly common. In autumn-winter of 2011, Katie featured her show Gris Gris. A Gris Gris is a voodoo talisman bag that originated in Africa and was believed to protect the wearer from evil or bring luck.
Oh, I love that sort of, like all those sort of different talismans and things from all different sorts of cultures. I love those.
I agree. And from the Gris Gris, Katie's interpretation featured grays and blacks, asymmetries, and paradoxical volumes. The models were made up with heavily blackened eyes and a cyborg-esque eye detail.
Oh, interesting.
Katie discussed her spring and summer 2012 collection with a blog, starting with its title, Red, Red Blood. Katie wanted to make clear that it was, quote, not the blood of nightmares of brutality, but the blood that's sanguine, living and the brightest red, end quote.
Oh, I like that, because it takes a twist on something that you would assume and makes it something that isn't as dark and depressing.
Exactly. And like we mentioned, makeup and hair fold into this as well. In the show, the theme carries over, and the makeup was inspired by the bloodstream and the hair inspired by the heart.
Oh, that sounds cool.
Yeah. She's very cool. Everything about her is cool. Katie's last collection that year was for the autumn and winter of 2012. It was called Silent Soil and was inspired by the forest. She experimented with fabrics, and it included boiled wool, shearling, leather, silk, and chiffon.
What a blend of fabrics there. Interesting.
And chiffon. We're going to shade you, chiffon. Chiffon is also a notoriously difficult fabric to sew.
Oh, yes. It absolutely is.
Chiffon is very hard.
I remember hemming your dress that you wore for your bachelorette party. And all it was a very, very simple hem. But it's so delicate that you have to be so careful with it.
Yeah, it's just, from what I've heard, a menace.
Yeah, I did like the simplest job, just hemming. That's it. And it was just like, needed. Yeah, it fit beautifully, except for it was like just a couple inches too long.
No, it was more than a couple. It was everything's made for tall people, and I am a short person. So Sam had to hem off like 5 inches of this dress, y'all.
It looked beautiful, though. It was this really beautiful dress that you had.
Thank you. And So Katie had made a mark in her previous collections with the mesh leggings that began to be known as her trademark. She used them in this collection, Silent Soil, but in this one she did not highlight them like she had in her previous ones.
That's kind of an evolution. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Designs selectively chosen by the most fashionable have been pulled or borrowed for editorial shoots on an ongoing basis in Katie's collection. Daphne Guinness, who is world renowned for her fashion curation and design, and Nicola Formichetti, Lady Gaga's stylist, is known to frequent Katie Gallagher pieces.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The line of stockists for the Katie Gallagher line had grown to include high-end stores all around the world, making Katie's designs available to the fabulous and fashion-forward the world over. Katie explained her method of designing, saying, quote, "Everything I make starts with my paintings, which I've done every season prior to construction. I love to try to recreate a three-dimensional version of whatever I've drawn. It requires pretty unconventional pattern making," end quote.
I feel like that when I sew, I use very unconventional pattern making because I hate patterns. I am not a
Yes.
fan of working with a
No,
pattern.
I was going to say on the subject of pattern making, it is the one thing that ever kept me from a career in fashion design or merchandising. The work is incredibly delicate and obviously has to be mathematically precise and cut with such attention to detail that your garment will come together like you want it. Also, my best friend told me after 2 flat patterning classes in her fashion merchandising degree, she was almost at the end of her rope with it. It's apparently so difficult.
I can't imagine making patterns. Like, that seems incredibly daunting, having to make a pattern. I'm the type of person,
Yeah.
I prefer to pin and get it on a bust or try it on myself so I can cut and learn that way versus laying something out with a pattern.
Yeah, flat patterning. Oof. On November 5th, 2012, Gallagher launched the Katie by Katie Gallagher diffusion line of clothing that included both separates and jewelry pieces.
Wow, so she's doing more as well, adding jewelry.
Exactly, yes, she was expanding. But now we jump ahead in our story to the tragic events of the summer of 2022. On July 3rd, 2022, a neighbor had noticed Katie struggling to get into her apartment and helped her out with the door. The morning of July 4th, that same neighbor who had helped Gallagher inside the previous night noticed the door to her Eldridge Street apartment closed with the key still in the lock.
Oh, that's scary.
The neighbor entered to make sure she was okay and found Gallagher face up on the bed. A 911 call was made, I assume by the neighbor, but I was unable to find it in my research. The NYPD responded to the call from a Manhattan building and found the 35-year-old unresponsive Katie dead in her bedroom.
Oh, she's still so young, 35.
It's awful. And when they got there, the body bore no obvious signs of trauma and was in Katie's bedroom in her Eldridge Street apartment, discovered at 9 p.m. It wasn't clear to the police at this point what, if anything, was missing from Katie's home. Then, for 8 months, things went quiet. It was kept under wraps that Katie had been discovered dead, but after the passage of time, it was made public.
8 months?
Yes.
That's a long period of time to not, announce a death of a famous designer.
8 months to the day, March 24th, 2023, her identity was revealed to the public. The rising fashion star who dressed everyone from Lady Gaga to Laverne Cox, Katie Gallagher, had been found dead. The NYPD announced that Katie's death had been ruled a homicide under investigation.
Do you know why it was such a long period of time before her death was announced?
I don't. I imagine it's because what happened to Katie wasn't the only time this happened. So I
Oh,
imagine maybe they were trying to connect dots and didn't want to reveal which cases they were looking at. I'm not positive why they would wait 8 months.
that just seems like such a long period of time. I'm assuming people probably were questioning why she
Mm-hmm.
wasn't putting out a collection within that
Mm-hmm.
time
Mm-hmm.
frame. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The medical examiner's office was reached by NBC New York, where they say Katie had died of acute intoxication by the combined effects of alcohol, fentanyl, ethanol, and p-fentanyl.
Oh, wow.
According to the CDC, p-fentanyl had been a popular drug that was being passed around and had been found in 8 states between late 2020 and June 2021.
Yeah, that's scary. Like that, like
Ugh.
fentanyl and p-fentanyl both are terrifying drugs.
Oh yes, they're very. I You can't even inhale. Like certainly can't inhale them. Like you can barely come into contact with it with your skin without it being toxic to you.
Oh, I didn't know it was
It's
that intense. I just know that a little tiny bit goes a very, very long way, and it's very, very easy to misjudge that.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The city medical examiner also stated Gallagher died by drug facilitated theft, indicating to NBC that someone may have drugged Katie to steal something, though the NYPD had no more to say on the matter.
Drug facilitated theft. I've never heard that before. That's interesting.
Yes, I hadn't either. Sources said that Gallagher had been the victim of grand larceny, and the police were collecting evidence to link Katie's death to a pattern of victims who had been drugged and robbed.
Interesting.
Gallagher's family would make a statement to NBC New York that, quote, the homicide determination shared by the medical examiner today affirms what we knew. Katie was the victim of a crime. We have been holding this information while awaiting the official ruling. Sharing this news helps us set the record straight, demand accountability, and grieve more openly. They went on to say that the family was, quote, grateful for any developments that help us move forward, focus on Katie's life and legacy, and bring more awareness to fentanyl and similar drugs being used as weapons against innocent people.
Wow. That just blows my mind that that's a thing.
I
And it
know, I
oh my
know.
god.
And yeah, and they're right. What they're saying is this needs to be looked at more closely because it is being used weaponized.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shortly after that statement was made, a memorial was held for Katie in her home state of Pennsylvania, and another celebration of life was marked for May 2023 in New York City. Police began investigating Katie's case and linked her death to no less than 26 other such deaths, including
Wow.
5 on the Lower East Side.
That's
Yeah.
that just blows my mind.
Mm-hmm. Investigators determined that there were 2 separate patterns in the 26 deaths, but did not elaborate on what they were. They did say 5 fatal overdoses were linked to these patterns.
That's I'm honestly blown away right now.
I
I
know,
can't
20.
imagine being drugged. Like that's a lot of drugs that somebody's
Mm-hmm.
carrying
Mm-hmm.
around and has consistent access to.
Yeah. Yeah, especially a potent opioid like fentanyl, to have
Mm-hmm.
so much access to that. And just the callousness of drugging someone and just giving them as much as you want, and if it's too much for their body to handle, what does it matter to you? You were looking to get their money anyway.
Yeah, and as I was saying earlier, like, a little bit goes such a long way. How do you know that person's like body chemistry to know their dosage? Obviously, whoever's doing this doesn't, because it's
Doesn't
resulting in so
care.
many deaths. Yeah, yeah. There's no
Yeah.
they truly care about it, but that's oh god.
5 fatal overdoses linked to these patterns. And at this point, there's been no official indication that Katie's case is connected. But in regards to at least 2 of the deaths, police have charged Kenwood Allen. Allen was indicted by a Manhattan grand jury in December, I assume December of 2022, for 2 of the murders. At the time of his arraignment, prosecutors said they anticipated additional charges connected to other victims who did not survive. So they're still examining even more cases connected to this man, Kenwood Allen.
Yeah, and it might be like years and years of determining that more cases are connected to him if there's 26 deaths.
Yep, potentially.
Yeah, absolutely.
June 22nd, 2023 would be the day when this terrible crime spree would come to light and bring understanding to countless families as more charges were filed. 33-year-old Kenwood Allen would be charged with a crime spree that affected 21 people, it said in his indictment.
Oh, wow.
Kenwood Allen's pattern was drugging, robbing, and larceny from his victims. 3 more charges of murder in connection with this were brought, one being the death of Katie Gallagher.
Okay, good. So I'm glad at least there's obviously a lot of victims here, but at least she has the ability for her family to hopefully see an end to this.
Correct. He has been charged with her murder. Yes, it's no longer like this could be connected. No, he's been charged with her murder. And he would be charged with 3 more murders, with crimes happening in such quick succession, it's truly shocking. Murders that were allegedly committed on July 22nd, 2022, July 23rd, 2022, and August 6th, 2022.
Wow. That's so close. Like there's no cool down with
no
that.
cool down at all. It's so fast.
That's mind-blowing to me. And I wonder, just based on the number of victims, like obviously if this guy is doing it, he's working at a fast speed. But I'm curious if maybe he's not the only one involved with that many deaths.
Well, the NYPD did state that there were 2 distinct patterns.
Yeah.
In these drug-related deaths.
Like, I wonder if they're kind of working together, but working independently type of thing.
Well, that'll come back.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. The charges in a New York State Supreme Court indictment show Allen faces 10 counts of murder in the second degree, 13 counts of robbery in the first degree, 2 counts of robbery in the second degree, 11 counts of assault in the second degree, 2 counts of attempted robbery in the first degree, 3 counts of grand larceny in the fourth degree, 3 counts of criminal possession of a controlled substance in the third degree, and 1 count of conspiracy in the fourth degree. Truly, the amount of damage this man wrought is dizzying.
Yeah, that list kind of just went on and on. And I'm glad for it, because if he's doing this, he deserves to be charged with every little piece of it. But wow.
Yeah, every last part. Yeah. He is going to be held accountable, because this is very current for us folks. Like,
absolutely.
He's still going through the justice system, but if he did this, then you're right, he deserves to have every last part of it.
So this
put
hasn't gone to
forth.
trial or anything yet. This is
No,
just
this is
still
not.
in process. Okay.
Correct. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg Jr. said in a statement, quote, "These alleged pernicious drugging and robbery schemes have left far too many families mourning the loss of their loved ones. The careful and meticulous work of our prosecutors and the NYPD has led us to charge this individual with a spree of criminal conduct that now includes 5 murders, 4 of which took place over a mere 15 days last summer. We will continue to work closely with our law enforcement partners to aggressively uncover and investigate these incidents." End quote.
And that's not including even because I'm referring to the 5 murders in 15 days. And you said that she was murdered on the 3rd to the 4th, sometime in
Correct.
there, right? So
Correct.
Add a handful of more days there, and you have an additional murder.
Mm-hmm.
That's mind blowing.
It's so wild. Just the brazenness.
So, to like the events of her murder, you said her neighbor saw her and she was struggling to get inside.
Yes.
Do you think at that point she was drugged and her neighbor saw her drugged?
I don't know. I think the neighbor would have been spoken to as a witness if he had seen her with someone else.
Well, I'm just thinking, like, if she's struggling to get inside and that seems out of character, maybe she was already drugged at that point and someone was going to follow up later. Like, I don't know how fast these drugs kick in.
I don't know. For me, judging from the crime scene, I think she was drugged where she was found. She was in her bed.
Interesting.
She just, yeah.
I'm just thinking, like, why could she have struggled? Like, was that just really a coincidence? Absolutely could be.
I assume she was probably carrying something and needed help.
And then the keys just left inside. Because when you said that, I kind of assumed she was struggling to get in and left her own keys in the door. But that could not be the case as well. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible they were her own keys. I'm just saying that she could have been struggling to get through the door holding something. He helps her through the door with whatever it is she's carrying, and she lets the door swing shut behind her. And her keys
potentially acts. Yeah, there's absolutely that possibility. It's an interesting, like, order of events, and I'm assuming a lot of that's probably kept close to the vest because the trial hasn't started yet. Like, I'm just curious about, like, that specific timeline that they're thinking, but that information might not be out there yet.
Announcing the indictment, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg Jr. said there were 21 victims in total, including the deaths of 5 people between March and December of 2022.
Wow.
Yeah. So all that damage wrought in just between March and December.
It's like, as we mentioned so briefly before, but like a cool down. When it comes to a lot of serial killers, there's at least some cool down. And that's why a lot of serial killers take mementos, at least in their opinion, mementos, trophies, kind of whatever you want to call them, is because that helps them keep that, like, high during that cool down period until they need it again.
Right.
It's very interesting how quick this is all happening.
Yeah, exactly. This is like, he was going to, I mean, 2 of them were back to back, 2 nights in a row.
Yeah, 2 nights in a row. That's
going out
crazy. There. And I wonder, do we know what was stolen from her?
No, only that she was, sources had said, I'm not sure if it was in the charging documents, but sources had said she was a victim of grand larceny. So
So they're getting
I'll
money.
explain exactly. I'll explain a
Oh,
little bit.
interesting. Because I'm just like wondering, like, what are they getting and what are they flipping? But if they're getting money, that's a whole different story too.
Right, I'll explain that shortly. What it sort of Kenwood Allen would do here. At the time being, as of May 2022, one of Gallagher's sisters, Lara, said her family had been working closely with the district attorney's office in New York and the New York Police Department officials. Asked for comment at Allen's indictment, she referenced an issued statement from the family that described the second indictment as, quote, a necessary next step towards seeking justice for Katie. Knowing that he can't hurt anyone else provides comfort during this difficult time, end quote.
Yeah, and I would hope it gives them comfort minimally.
Mm-hmm. The family statement included another telling detail to the crime, saying, quote, Katie was targeted just outside her home by Kenwood Allen, a stranger to her. We hope that the facts of this case help bring more awareness to fentanyl and similar drugs being used as weapons against innocent people. The number of victims confirmed at this point is shocking. Our hearts go out to them, their families, and their friends. We are gutted by the magnitude of this collective and senseless loss. So they're saying he targeted her. He
Yeah.
saw her. And I'm hoping, as part of the defense's discovery, when the prosecution lays the cards on the table, that maybe there is CCTV footage of
Mm-hmm.
him selecting her.
Well, I assume there is, just based on the comment that saying that she was targeted just outside her home. I would assume they have evidence of that, likely in the form of camera footage.
Mm-hmm.
At least I would hope so.
I hope, yeah. The family statement concluded saying, quote, while we wait and welcome developments that may provide some closure and accountability, we will continue to focus our energy on Katie's life and legacy. She was talented, ambitious, and a beloved designer and artist. Having just returned to New York City last spring, she was excited for the future and new opportunities.
Oh, and she had so much ahead of her. She was still so young.
She really did. She had a boundless future. And here we're going to come back a little bit and talk about Kenwood Allen's pattern and what he does. According to court documents and statements made on the record, between March 18th and December 18th, 2022, Allen committed a series of robberies and other crimes throughout Lower Manhattan, sometimes alone and sometimes with other individuals.
Oh, okay. So
he shared his twisted crime spree with some unknown collaborators.
that's something that just blows my mind.
Yeah. And those people also deserve to be brought to justice. And if you know anything, we will provide the tip line for Katie's case at the end of the episode and in our notes.
Oh, yes. It just like the thought of two people coming together and both wanting to do these horrendous crimes, murder people. It's just, that's something that's so mind-blowing to me.
Yeah. Drug them all the way to death to steal their money, because that's what it's coming down to.
Yeah. Just the fact that, like, you could sit there with somebody and be like, hey, I have an idea.
Yeah.
Oh, and then the other person going like, great, I'm in. Like, that's just,
exactly.
I can't wrap my head around it.
Imagine the idea being this. And someone's like, okay. It's wild. Because, so in most of these incidents, I refer to money because in most of these incidents, Allen would drug his victims with the powerful fentanyl and other opioids in order to steal their credit cards, watches, phones, and other personal identifying information. Many of the victims were later found unconscious on the street. He would then withdraw cash from ATMs and use the stolen credit cards to make purchases and transfer money.
Wow. And they just leave
Yeah,
him on the street? Like, this all just blows my mind.
left them on the street for dead so you could go spend their money.
I wonder how they're administering these drugs. Because by the sound of all of this, it seems very unsuspecting to these victims.
Yes,
Like,
I would agree. I don't know. I would agree, though. I would imagine it maybe in a powder form that might be shown on some of the prosecution's discovery.
It's probably part of the
inject it.
Yeah, I know nothing about any of it, but I would assume that's part of the patterns that the police are referring to, is if they're seeing these victims be given the drugs in specific ways, that I would assume that probably fits the patterns that they're specifically referring to. That's just my own kind of speculation on it, but that's like, I just can't imagine going on with my day, being unsuspectingly drugged and wake up on the street. Like, that's just, that's absolutely terrifying.
Literally robbed of all your personal effects. Because, like, yeah, he's stealing everything. Watches, wallets, unconscious in the street with none of your identifying information.
Yeah, and again, I don't know a whole lot about these drugs, but I'm assuming there's probably a decent possibility of loss of memory.
Yeah, I don't know.
I have no idea, but like, when you're drugged that heavily, I would imagine that is probably a common side effect if you survive.
Yes, correct. Yeah. If you survive. In May 2023, the Gallagher family held a memorial for Katie in New York City. The family was able to hold this service away from their home in Pennsylvania due to Katie's community coming together in kindness and generating enough funds on a GoFundMe for her memorial. About 150 friends, colleagues, and relatives paid tribute to Gallagher at St. Mary Grand. The designer's ethereal appearance belied an artist who is not afraid to explore darkness. As photographer William Eden, recalling his first meeting with Gallagher, so beautifully put it, Katie, quote, was the brightest, shiniest, but softest and warmest light in that crowded, smoky room.
I like that.
It's well said. I think it's well said, yes.
I feel like we would be friends with Katie. I feel like if we all knew each other, we would be friends.
Absolutely. I would love to be her friend. She's so... doing this case it's heartbreaking. And some of that spirit was captured in the open familial mood and the decorations of the memorial. The altar was made a shrine with beautiful arrangements and was constructed with relics such as Gallagher's favorite shoes, patent leather Caro Mary Janes, sky-high platforms, and sneakers. The designer was a competitive high school track star and city jogger. Opposite displays of her pieces on the other side of the room was Gallagher's home sewing machine, a poignant reminder of the DIY spirit that animated Katie and that was in part through necessity.
It sounds like a really beautiful kind of display of who she is in her career.
Yeah, absolutely. Because as noted by Cindy Waters, a shoe designer, quote, in over 13 years, 26 seasons, she never had a financial backer, and she was damn proud of that.
Wow. And as we were saying earlier, millions of dollars had to have gone into her work. Wow.
And I think you're right that is such a beautiful symbol, just sort of her sewing machine there empty. It's It's so heartbreaking. Lining the room were examples of Gallagher's work that demonstrated the role that complex pattern making and attention to detail played in her designs. She was ahead of the pack in fusing her two passions, sport and fashion, as we know, with the complex mesh in leggings being all but expected today.
Mm-hmm.
As Gabby Asfor told Vogue Runway just last year, quote, now every company does activewear and has this type of construction. I think she was a great influencer in the industry and she inspired a lot of people, end quote.
Oh, absolutely. You just can see it anywhere
Mm-hmm.
you shop for leggings. Like, it's not exclusive to high-end stores at all anymore.
Another trademark of Katie's were bows, and some hidden, like sweet secret surprises became another of her signatures, part of the dark romance of her worldview.
Oh, I like that too.
Well, processing grief for family and friends was one aspect of this New York City memorial. The other was commemoration. Gallagher lives on not only in people's hearts, but as a maker. She also lives through the art and objects she made with her own hands. These will form the Katie Gallagher Artist Archive, which was approved for fiscal sponsorship by Fractured Atlas in March,
Oh, that's great.
and is the family's way of preserving and expanding the designer's narratives.
It'll be great that people can still go see her work.
Yes, exactly. And that it is considered important that it's gotten sponsorship. That's so good.
Absolutely. Like, it's one of my favorite things, going and seeing exhibits, especially like I go to a lot of uh, rock and roll exhibits that are traveling, and I love the costume section of like the stage costumes and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like this is her version of that, and that sounds incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. Lara, Katie's sister, has been cataloging the collection and spoke of discovering aspects of her sister in the process. Looking at the pieces on view, the positive message proffered by the Costume Institute's curator, Andrew Bolton, rings true when he recently said with confidence, quote, I think you can know someone through their working methodology.
I absolutely agree with that, especially as an artist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, as we were saying earlier, everyone kind of has their own process to get that end result.
Absolutely.
And you can learn so much about how that person works and their just thought process through everything by seeing that progression. And art is one
Yeah.
of the few fields that you see all of those details in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Jamie Thrower, the celebrant of the memorial, a Portland, Oregon death doula, led attendees on a procession to Gallagher's former Chinatown apartment building for a burning ritual with candles and smudges made from dried flowers from Gallagher's funeral last summer.
Oh, that sounds beautiful.
It does, honoring her spirit in a way. And this might sound odd, but the term doula is now used in multiple ways. Typically, it's used in helping families through birth and also the life circumstances and change. And they have been used since the 1980s in relation to birth and postpartum care.
Yeah, that's how I've always heard of a doula, was through the birthing
Mm-hmm.
process.
Yes. In the late 1990s, doula also came to be referred to someone in the death care industry. The meaning is much the same, someone who will help care for the family and their new normal, typically as a person passes away over a period of time.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, with Katie's murder, there was no time, and I think that speaks all the more to the need for a death doula.
Yeah, it's so unbelievably unexpected. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
extra coping that you can't prepare
Mm-hmm.
for. It's hard to prepare for any
Mm-hmm.
death, but when it's so sudden like that.
Mm-hmm. Her sister said, quote, "This was Katie's city. She just knew where to get everything. Every button, every kind of flower. She walked everywhere. She didn't ride the subway. She just walked and walked and walked. That's why the procession was so important."
Oh, wow. That's such a beautiful way to like fit her personality into it as well.
Exactly. Like they were really, all the aspects of this memorial were about honoring Katie.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, I imagine it must have been quite a thing to see and very sad. Katie's sisters wrote her obituary, and it's a heartbreaking piece to read that someone of such promise was taken so suddenly. The sisters shared that after establishing her fashion line, she achieved dreams of showing at not just New York Fashion Week, but Paris Fashion Week. They further shared that Katie had been working on her 27th collection at the time of her death. Katie had planned to show this collection in Fashion Week that fall of 2022. Her sisters also called out Katie's achievements, like the stars who wore her clothing that I mentioned, but also the publications they appeared in, such as Vogue, The Cut, Elle, and Glamour over the years. On a more personal note, they described Katie as a fearless designer committed to excellence, one with a heart and touch so gently magnanimous that people and even animals appeared drawn to her.
Mm.
Her obituary read in part, quote, "Like A. A. Milne's Eeyore, she preferred gloomy days and cold rain. As a child, she was drawn to the woods, mixing potions and playing there with her sisters. Animals were drawn to her gentle and calm demeanor. She could talk to them and once even touched a deer in the stillness of the trees. She loved poetry and heavy metal. She felt deeply, though she couldn't always articulate it. And she had an enormous, forgiving heart. When she was younger, she was an obsessive athlete, a gymnast, and a state qualifying long distance runner. Katie loved Halloween, witches, and ghosts, and had the tattoos to let everyone know it." To read these words to me is to love Katie. I've been so alert on this case and closely following it that I would say Katie Gallagher is one of the cases where I most relate to the victim, because she was such a passionate designer, covered in black and tattoos, and just had a huge heart. If you had to make a list of ways to be friends with me, those would be 3 big check boxes right at the top.
Yep.
The obituary ended, quote, "She was unique, beautiful, smart, unabashed, and always wanting. She was hardworking and talented, with so many ideas and plans for future projects. We are so proud of who she was and all she achieved in her brief but full and beautiful life. She was Katie, our daughter, sister, aunt, and friend."
That's a beautiful obituary. And
It
it really, like as you were saying in there, it really makes me wish I had the ability to be friends with her, because she sounds like an incredible person who has a lot of similar interests as me. And
Yeah. And when people describe her as magnetic, it's clear. It's not
I
even,
understand why. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, not even to be in her presence, but to have both of us be like, "Wow, we wish we could be her friend," speaks to what a magnetic presence she was.
Yeah, definitely.
While spending the past 10 months photographing and cataloging 550 plus garments that had been stowed away in a storage unit in Los Angeles, where the designer lived briefly, her filmmaker sister Lara said, quote, "For her to have kept all that, despite moves and instability, she just knew her worth and that it was important from the very beginning." End quote.
Yeah, I think when you're a creator like that and you have such strong ambitions for the future, and you know you have what it takes, that whole journey becomes so incredibly important.
Absolutely.
And it seems like
And
she
to
realized
just
that
have,
early.
Yeah, exactly. And good for her. And an archive is always a great thing to have for an artist. And like her sister said, multiple moves she did, and she still knew that she wanted those clothes preserved.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad she did.
Me too. And speaking of which, as the family seeks curators and museums for some of her designs and to share her work in other ways, plans are underway to line up an intern through California State Long Beach's master's program in textile archiving to help suss out a plan for Katie's collection that has been left.
I'm glad that there's so much going into this and there's the clear appreciation for her work that it seems like so
Absolutely.
many people are coming together to make sure it can still be seen.
Exactly. And yeah, just people hand in hand with each other recognizing the importance that these garments still hold.
Hmm.
As we mentioned, Kenwood Allen may have had accomplices, and the police determined two separate patterns in the druggings. And those people should be brought to justice as well. Anyone with information on Katie Gallagher's case is asked to call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-577-8477. This case was a hard one for me to cover. Just to see an artist with so much life and talent taken away so soon at just 35 for no reason other than a robbery. I feel like the quote that was made about knowing someone based on their working methodology is true for Katie Gallagher. Looking at her clothes and hearing her stories about the way she worked made me want to be friends with her, like we just said. Her iconic thesis project in all black made me want to be her friend. And this interest in dark romance and everything spooky, including her tattoos. So, like we just said, she really did have a magnetic personality. I hope her family was able to lay Katie to rest as they wished, but also find solace in the New York City memorial where Katie's friends gathered to show how special she was. Even the processional smudging to her apartment shows how many people loved her, cared about her, and wanted to honor her. She never should have been taken from these people this way. She should be here working on her 2023 autumn winter show like she deserved. There's small comfort in knowing that Katie had achieved her dreams and shown at every large fashion event. Those dreams were so much bigger, though, and her family and friends deserved to have seen that. She had so much life and energy and passion for fashion inside her. We, the public, would have been privileged to see more from her.
Yeah, and I think what you said though, she's incredibly lucky that she well it's not it's luck. It's incredible hard work, but she had this ability to do that so young. And
Mm-hmm.
people with the same talent don't always have that opportunity. And I'm so happy that she did.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so happy that her passions were recognized and fostered and grew and became what they were.
And consistently appreciated. And like
Mm-hmm.
that's such a big part of it is clearly people loved her work.
Mm-hmm. Clearly. As we mentioned before, Kenwood Allen has only begun his journey through the legal system. Currently being indicted on so many charges, he is in jail awaiting a trial date. However, that's not to say that more charges against Allen aren't forthcoming, and I'll be patiently awaiting the day they lock him up for good. And that was my tale of Katie's fashion, her tragic murder, and Katie Gallagher's legacy. I hope you enjoyed it. And once more, if you or anyone you know anything about the murder of Katie Gallagher, please call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-577-8477. Sam, any final thoughts?
This was a this was mind blowing to me because I've never heard of a crime like this.
Mm-hmm.
Like
It's
to
unique,
this
quite unique.
extent. I am curious your thoughts on if you think he will plead guilty.
I think it's going to depend on how many more of these charges are forthcoming, however many more they can attach him to. And what I think he's going to do is maybe plead guilty and maybe work out some kind of plea deal with the prosecution to also implicate those who worked with him, since we know he, at one point at least, had an accomplice.
Right. I hope that's exactly what he does, because...
Yeah, I think he'll throw anybody under the bus to avoid the consequences of his own actions.
I think that kind of depends on how kind of deep this all goes, and how if this is actually like a theft ring, or if this is a few people doing this. That I really hope that he turns on whoever it is, because the people who are doing this deserve to be behind bars. But with so many charges against him, I can't imagine him pleading not guilty.
Yeah,
but you never know.
It would be a long reach, but
I think he'll likely plead guilty based on the charges, and based on kind of the speculation I was saying before, with them stating that they know that he met her outside of her apartment. I'm assuming there's camera footage.
Yeah, so, I think that once the discovery from the prosecution drops on the defense's desk, they're going to turn to this dude and say, plead out now.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking. And hopefully that comes with him naming the people he's working with. Hopefully.
Yeah, I hope that it, I know that plea deals can be worked out in a multitude of different ways and do require compromise, but I do hope that part of it would involve flipping on his collaborators.
Yeah, and I can't imagine... Well, the thing I kind of think about it is I can't imagine he is in a position with, most specifically, all of the murder charges, that he would ever spend a day outside of prison after this. Yeah. Then that could be a reason to not name your accomplices. If there's, even with a plea deal, I doubt he's gonna ever be out of prison. But
I hope not.
We'll have to wait and see. And I really hope he names these people, because this is a terrifying crime, and it's happening in such a frequent basis here.
Right, and like we said, a very unique crime, one you're not used to hearing, weaponizing fentanyl. You hear so often about fentanyl overdoses, and now it's this unique kind of crime where fentanyl is being used quite literally as a weapon.
And he's getting his hands on a lot of fentanyl.
Where I don't know where he's getting it from, but with how many charges and how many cases there were, he had to have access to it on a consistent basis, which means there's at least one other person involved, unless he has a huge amount of fentanyl just sitting around his apartment.
Well, that's why I think this could be like more organized crime. That there's like a chain of command potentially, because you see that a lot in these robberies and that sort of thing, where it's a group of people with the same end goal. So I'm very interested to hear updates as they come out.
I am as well.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening to Have You Heard About This Case? If you liked this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And you can find us on Instagram at Have You Heard About This Case Pod, on TikTok at HYHATC, or you can email us at haveyouheardaboutthiscase@gmail.com. Thanks, and we'll talk to you later.
Bye.